situation where people are going to, if they devalue the dollar, in essence, you are able to buy less.
Right. So food prices are going to probably double or triple. Gas prices will double or triple. International commodities, because of climate change, are going to become very dear. So commodities will be very. Then you'll probably have commodity wars, like Russia started it with their fires across 5 trade zones. So Russia is now no longer selling wheat and other grains. And as a result, the countries around it are either having to sell more or their prices are rising, like the Canadian farmers and the American farmers that were not doing so well because they had some crops. America is one of the places that hasn't been hit with famine this year. Their prices they're getting are really high. I mean, they're doing very well. They've got serious cash crops of main commodities. And what's going on is countries like Bahrain and the Arab Emirates and China are flying over here with three-piece suited Chinese businessmen and paying farmers in advance to deliver the crop to their containers, say in Long Beach, California, or San Francisco, or other places, or Houston, and actually ship it directly to China. So they're trying to buy it in advance of even the commodities market that goes in the exchange port in Chicago.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and they're doing that in advance, and they're actually getting more. They're trying to buy them even further in advance, like even bankroll a specific farmer or group of farmers in a certain area like Iowa to say, we will buy your crop in advance, and we'll pay this price for it in advance, so you don't even have to worry about, before you can put it in the ground, we'll guarantee you X amount of dollars.
Okay, but on top of that, we have some people are saying, and certainly there was an article on Global Research talking about the buildup of ships in the Gulf, in the area of Gulf of Aden and in the Middle East in general. So
yeah, Gulf of Aden is the alternate route for oil coming out of there. For example, the oil coming out of Sudan comes to the Red Sea. It goes down to the Gulf of Aden.
Okay.
And so there's two pinch points. There's the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf of Aden, or they call it Gates of Aden. And it's interesting, Aden is the ancient place that was referred to in the Bible by the ancient, I'm not going to put a thousands of year date on it, but the ancient, we call the men called Adam, and their family, if you want to call it, which is Eden, actually is in Yemen, or the west side of Yemen, right on the Gulf of Aden.
Uh-huh.
So it's interesting it's in that same place, but those are the two pinch points. And you're right, there's a ton of Navy there. I've talked to my naval contacts, and there's a ton of Navy already present there, because they know when conflict breaks out, it'll break out between Yemen and Somalia and those areas, and it'll break out on the other side between Iran and Saudi Arabia and the Arab Emirates across the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, so which side is, for example, the Arab Emirates going to side with? Saudi Arabia or the U.S.?
Saudi Arabia, yeah, they'll side into Saudi Arabia.
And are they going to side with the U.S.?
Yeah, of course they are, yeah. Saudi
yeah.
Arabians and Saudi Arabians, Arab Emirates, all these are signed up and lined up with the British and the Americans. And Iran is lined up with China and the Shanghai Cooperation Group. And just 2 weeks ago, for the last couple of weeks, the Chinese have been doing air war games with the Turks, which is really unusual because they used to be more secular, but they now have a more Islamic government. So they're doing Turkey is doing war games with China, with both war games with bombers and their advanced Russian-designed jets, Syria and Iran. So the last couple of weeks they've been doing war games with these countries. And, of course, the Russians have just built the largest naval base in the Middle East on the Syrian port. So they're getting lined up. They're getting the players lined up for a World War III.
Okay. And when do you think that this might go off, if at all?
I think it's posturing, to be honest with you, because everybody knows you can't start a war you can't finish. I mean, as I said repeatedly on my show, because I've had lots of experts on, like my expert on. I've got a background where I was trained under a biological weaponeer. And Tim Alexander, our news anchor that now does a daily show on our TV channel, he worked for the government. He's even done international work with the Israelis and the American government and foreign service to advising them on weapon systems and defense. And what he said is that if we attacked Iran, let's say just the Bushehr reactor, which is 700 technicians and scientists, and they're now fueling it. And the Iranians are no slouches. They were able to reverse the effects of the Stuxnet virus, which was brought in by USBs, pretty quickly. Most people were thinking it would take a year for them to sort it out, but it only took them a week. And so they basically neutralized the Stuxnet virus, which is almost certainly an Israeli cybernetic attack. And it also apparently affected the Chinese, and the Chinese are not stupid either. They've neutralized the effect of the Stuxnet. So we have a currency war, we have trade war, and we now have a cybernetic war with these countries in preparation.
When you say cybernetic, you're talking nanotechnology?
No, it's a new type of code where it goes into these Siemens controllers that are used in manufacturing, let's say controlling machine lathes and production equipment. And the Siemens company makes these special production software platforms, and you have to walk in with a USB. It doesn't go on the internet, and you have to plug it into the computer. And when you do it, it changes the computer code, and it can also sit there for months or whatever and activate later. But it will make the machine destroy itself, for example.
So you're calling that, in essence, it's creating a virus, but you're calling it a cybernetic organism?
It's a cybernetic code that's more than just like a code that will destroy your hard drive and your computer. It'll actually take a machine that's operating in a factory and make the actual machine destroy itself. So like it might overheat it, or it may make the machine lathe kind of misfunction, or not properly control itself so it vibrates too much and all of a sudden it flies apart or it explodes.
I understand. So you're saying that this code was embedded in some
You have to carry it by a USB code, so they actually had to have
but it was put
spies walk in and actually plug it into the computer or the factories and actually get into the network for the factories to control, say, air conditioning and conveyor belts and machine lathes and everything else that runs these factories, and kind of blow up the controls. And
I understand, but this was done to Iran, and you're saying it took them a week.
And China, Iran and China, both were affected.
And they both surmounted the situation.
Very quickly. So it kind of takes offline, because one of the things that has been in the plan, I've heard this from my sources, is far back as 16 years ago, is one of the future plans that we've war-gamed out. And we've done, by the way, war-gamed this out on a program tied in with the University of San Francisco in a series of what's called SuperNet computers across America, going all the way from Silicon Valley right through the Champlain, Illinois, and right through to Harvard and Cornell University and Yale. They have this super high-speed communications network that's hundreds of thousands of megabytes per second. They have decades.
Yes, I understand that.
What they've done is they use the supercomputer systems for simulating these different war games, and they've basically kind of war gamed us all as to how they can kind of control the future with this, a cybernetic model of Earth. It's called Virtual Earth Project. Yes. And the main note of that was it's Falcon, Colorado, Schriever Air Force Base, where they have the Cray 4 and Cray 5 array underground. Now,
right.
What's likely to happen is that we're going to have an economic correction and enough pain to make us accept a world government, and it'll happen relatively quickly. And it's like waterboarding the populations. Unfortunately, the unemployment rate is probably going to go up. There's probably going to be forced austerity, which means basically a lot of people are going to lose most of their assets, or they're going to lose most of their equity or pensions, whatever. Places like in France where you can't go and take a partial pension at a certain age. If you don't reach your full pension age, you don't get a pension at all. So a lot of people are going to work till they die. And the young people aren't going to find jobs because the older people aren't going to be able to quit. So it's going to be nasty. And it's designed to crush the population and the middle classes of all the Western nations, because they want to start reduction of world population. And they really basically want to concentrate on the first and second world, because the third world to them they can eliminate with things like hazards like the Mount Merapi explosion and these tsunami that struck the Indonesian islands, and the biological weapons that they can release, or just starvation because of the collapse in the economy. Just like the IMF took in the third world, and went in there and devalued there and bought up everything and privatized everything, and then they destroyed the middle classes in those countries, and then set up an elite, but they were subservient to the global elite and the global corporations.
Right.
They want to do that now to the first and second world, so they're going to try to IMF the United States, Canada, Australia, Britain, etc., and all these other nations,
Okay. I hear you. Okay, Bill, we kind of have to cut this short at this point because we've been going for a while here, and I do appreciate all the information you are giving.
Yeah, I think the key thing is I think there's financial things going to happen in next month, right after the election.
Yeah.
There's a high probability of a terror event or planned terror event, which
but
is most likely.
I have a question for you. Okay.
Yeah.
The question is in light of all the things that have already been happening.
Right.
And in other words, these other things, in my opinion, seem to be just building on them and continuing the trend, if you will, possibly with some escalations. But isn't it quite possible that at this point, in other words, the human organism is beginning to realize that things are not really hanging together, and that there's a move now to create communities that are going to create a counterbalance to what's actually been rolling out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. In fact, you've crystallized the fact that although they've tried to globalize the economy and global control, they've also woken the population up reversed that they need to have communities, they need to have a consciousness arising, they need to transcend religion and skin color and nation states. Although we do need nation states, we need to realize we're a global community that is on a relatively small closed-loop earth, where you can't start a war, you can't release a plague, you can't go and say it's okay to hit the Bashar reactor and make the Northern Hemisphere radioactive. And you're right, people are going to push back.
And not only that, but I mean, whether or not they like it or not, apparently in the private sector, there are plenty of extremely innovative people and companies that are actually at this moment creating alternative means of keeping oneself and one's group alive.
Exactly. Like, for example, on our show, I've had Paul Pantone. I already have contracts now with people that we're doing to convert all our cars to a Pantone reactor that can burn everything from vegetable oil to biodiesel or even wood chips. Their own home. If they have, for example, a septic field, they can generate with 4 people 5,000 watts of power for 8 to 12 hours a day. You're right. There's all kinds of really relatively right off the shelf technology now that for relatively minimal cost that can make you resistant to a collapse of the power grid, grows your own food, and protect yourself.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to deteriorate your road warrior, but the globalists are kind of making it more and more obvious to the population, because even the Congress may pass a bill in the spring knowing that top scientists, what I call white hats, that we're concerned, we're telling them that there's a danger of coronal mass ejections knocking out the power grid in our advanced technical world. And the Congress passed the bill, but it was defeated in the Senate. I think if it gets reintroduced, it'll get passed because...
Okay, what bill?
They need to protect the power grid from what's going on, because even if we have these communities, if you've got a major deterioration of a population, say in Orange County or LA or Chicago or some other big center, or some big city like Sao Paulo, Brazil, or Buenos Aires, these are huge cities. I mean, you cannot have the power go out and infrastructure, and you can't even pump gas. So the social chaos will be unbelievable.
Okay, yeah. Well, that element is still, I would say, sort of unmanageable, other than the idea that those people themselves will have to get into communities, even in those cities, which will probably happen naturally. People do tend to bond together at hard times. That is.
Yeah, and I think that I don't think we're going to have like a World War III strategy, but I think that there's a danger that these maniacs might try to bomb the Bashar reactor. We're probably going to pull back from it and have some kind of treaty in the Middle East, very likely with a push being announced on November 20th, which is right after this. They're going to be in Barcelona, announced the partitioning of the State of Israel and the city of Jerusalem. That's apparently going to be announced on the 20th. It's already on the schedule. We'll get the G20 meeting again in a month.
Well, how does the partitioning of the city of Israel, not city, the state of Israel, partitioning, I mean, they basically have already done this. How does that move?
Well, they've done it, but they haven't been recognized by these other countries. And when they do that, what they're trying to do is steer the consciousness of the population. The primary religions, if you want to call it, if you talk about the big Abrahamic religions that run the Western world, are Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. There's lots of other groups, whether it's Buddhism and all the other isms around the planet. But what they want to do is they want to have a universal religion that even goes beyond those three, with their symbol being a universal temple in Jerusalem. and they want to have it as an example of world peace. So there's a lot of moves afoot.